Why do Christians lack power in their lives? Why is it that there is such a dearth of miracles that magnify the God of the heavens and the earth? Why is it that Christians really are missing out on so many things? Well, the ancient scriptures tell us that the Gentiles have inherited lies, that they will come to Israel when they come back into their land in the last days. The Gentiles will cry out in repentance for the abominations that they inherited, and when they do, the Almighty will make known his hand, his might, and his name, Yehovah, will be known to the Gentiles. It also tells us that the Gentiles and the nations, that they call upon the name of Baal, which in Hebrew is the Lord, a nondescript title of a God, a nondescript God, which could be anything. But yet, if they will come to Israel and they will call upon and learn the name of the one true God, that they will be restored, they will be built up, they will be edified in the midst of Israel. And so we are going to delve into these things with Nehemiah Gordon. Nehemiah, take us into this prophetic trip into the end time.
Well, and Michael, you know, here I have to profess, as you're sharing these things, it's breaking my heart, because what my people have done, what the Jewish people have done, is instead of proclaiming the name to the Gentiles, even when Gentiles came to them and said, "What is the name?" we've perpetrated this cover-up. And I called my book "Shattering the Conspiracy of Silence." And where that comes from is this rabbinical concept that the name is too holy to pronounce, that not only can't Gentiles know about it, but even Jews must not speak this name. It must be kept hidden. And if you trace this back to its origins, and I talk there in my book about half the story, and I actually cut this because there wasn't enough room in the book. But the other half of the story is Roman persecution, and that was a key part of it. The Romans wanted to wipe out Judaism. They forbade the Jews to speak God's holy name. But there was another internal reason why the rabbis banned the name. Now, the first time anybody says in outside of the, let's say, the Essenes and the Samaritans, the first time in rabbinical Judaism that anybody banned the name was it appears in the Mishnah around the year 150 in the name of a rabbi named Abba Shaul. And this is in Sanhedrin 10:1, and he says, "Even one who pronounces the name according to its letters has no portion in the world to come." Which is a pretty heavy statement. Meaning, I grew up with this concept. I mean, in Christian terms, what he's saying there is a person who speaks God's name, who actually says the name Yehovah, has no salvation. Meaning, they don't use that term. That's Christian terminology. Right. But in the Jewish terminology of this period, they start out saying all Israel has a portion in the world to come. And then there's a list of exceptions. These don't have a portion in the world to come. And why don't they? Because they violated certain rabbinical prohibitions. Right? That's what gets you banned from the world to come. And the world to come, the image there is I think what a lot of Christians would call the millennial kingdom. In other words, the Jewish understanding is the Messiah will come, be a flesh and blood king over the earth. He'll defeat the enemies of Israel, gather in the exiles, and bring peace to the world. And under his reign, we will all have a portion in that world, in that kingdom. So they're saying, if you speak God's name, the rabbis are saying this around the year 150, then you will not have a portion in the world to come. Now, what most people do, and I'll admit that I'm part of this, I've read that, and usually focus on those words, and you say, okay, it's an absolute prohibition to speak God's name. There was this Israeli scholar named Ephraim Urbach, and he wrote this massive book. It was like 600 pages or something. He has footnotes that are 10 pages. I mean, this guy is a genius. He's considered the foremost expert in rabbinical Judaism. He wrote a book called The Sages. And in The Sages, he has like a 5-page footnote or something where he explains this statement of Abba Shaul in its historical context. And he says, you can't just start with Abba Shaul. Start at the beginning of the passage. And the beginning of the passage of the Mishnah is, these have no portion in the world to come. They list different people. And one of the people who has lost their salvation, in Christian terms, is those who read the outside books. And the Talmud explains outside books refers to the Gospels. Isn't that interesting? It's not a Torah prohibition, but the rabbis made this proclamation. Anyone who reads these outside books, and they call them in the Talmud there, Evangelion, which is gospel.
Question, the Gospels.
It's actually the Greek word for gospel, Evangelion. Anybody who reads these outside books has no portion in the world to come. And then it says, and those who whisper over a wound saying, and then it quotes the verse, Exodus 15:26, all the diseases I placed on Egypt I will not place on you. for I am the Lord who heals you. So there were people who were praying over those who were sick. In other words, they didn't have medicine like we have today. Not that that's always so great. But they didn't have any kind of, they didn't understand disease. The best you could do is pray over somebody. And the way that Jews often pray is by whispering. So for example, you see Hannah, who's in the tabernacle. And at the time, this wasn't a common practice. So the priest Eli sees her and he says, "Are you drunk? You're muttering under your breath." She says, "No, I'm praying." So the rabbis make the statement. They said somebody who whispers over a wound, quoting a Bible verse, has no portion in the world to come. Why is that? That's strange. And the answer is that the rabbis saw that this was working. People were praying over the sick, and they were being healed, and the rabbis couldn't do it. So they said, if you do that, you have no portion in the world to come. And it's in that context that Abba Shaul says, even one who pronounces the name according to its letters, meaning as part of a prayer for the sick. There were people who were healing in the name in the 2nd century, around the year 150. And the rabbis say, if you do that, if you heal in the name, actually pronouncing the name, Yud-He-Vav-He, the way it's pronounced, Yehovah, then you have no portion in the world to come. You've lost your Jewish salvation. Why? They don't say why, but apparently it's because they couldn't do it themselves.
Okay, so you have where this prohibition begins, and where we say the people that have no part in the world to come are those who are reading the Gospels.
Well, now those may be separate categories.
Maybe, but
or
again,
they may overlap.
He said, what's the context?
Right, they may overlap. And
right.
And one of the pieces of evidence that they overlap. Now, of course, in the New Testament, you have people healing in the name of Jesus, or I guess Yeshua. Right. And there's a great story in the Talmud about a certain rabbi who's bitten by a snake. Okay. And he's on the verge of death. And a believer in Yeshua comes to heal him in the name of Yeshua. And he refuses the healing and dies. And he's held up in the Talmud as a holy martyr because he refused to be healed in that name, in the name Yeshua, which is like unbelievable. Like the rabbis aren't denying that there's Jews who can heal in that name Yeshua. They're just saying we don't want any part of that, which is, it's unbelievable. Right. So what we know from other sources is there were people who were healing in the name of Yehovah. I mean, we know that, first of all, from here, from the Mishnah. Right. They were healing in the name of Yehovah, and those may have been just regular Jews. The Jewish multitudes who didn't obey the Pharisees. They just read the scriptures, and they read the verse. All the diseases I placed on Egypt, I will not place on you, for I am Yehovah who heals you. It's what it says. And in their desperation for a sick person, they'd pray over somebody, and they'd say that verse, and the rabbis would see somebody healed and say, that's forbidden. We can't have that outside of our power.
Okay, now you're reading this actually from a Hebrew text, right? This testimony.
This is the Mishnah, Sanhedrin 10:1, and the other references in the Talmud. These are Jewish sources from this period, from around the 2nd century.